There are moments in life when your knees hit the floor, your chest tightens, and your mind whispers, "This is it. I can't carry this anymore." But hear me now. What feels like the end to you is only the beginning to God. You've been losing sleep over problems that God already resolved in heaven. You're fighting battles God never asked you to fight. And today, He is saying, stop worrying. I've already taken care of everything. What feels like the end to you is only the beginning to God. And this truth becomes clearer the moment you stop looking at your situation through the eyes of fear and start seeing it through the eyes of heaven. There are moments when life hits you so hard that your mind genuinely believes the chapter is over. The job loss feels final. The heartbreak feels permanent. The diagnosis feels like the last line of your story. When the door slams in your face, your first instinct is to assume that nothing else will open. When everything collapses all at once, your heart whispers, "This is it. This is the ending." But endings are a human construct. God does not write endings where you see them. He writes transitions, redirections, and breakthroughs disguised as collapse. What you call destruction, God often calls construction. What you call loss, God calls clearing the path. What you call failure, God calls preparation. Think about how many times you believed your life was over, yet somehow you're still standing. You survived things that should have crushed you. You walked through moments that felt hopeless at the time. But looking back, you see that those same moments led you to something better. Something you never would have found without the so-called ending. The truth is simple. God specializes in turning endings into entrances. When life feels like it's falling apart, God is often making room for something you prayed for. Sometimes God answers your prayer by removing what cannot go with you. You ask God for peace, so He removed the relationship that was keeping you in turmoil. You ask God for growth, so He allowed the comfort zone to collapse. You ask God for clarity, so He let the confusion push you into seeking Him more deeply. You ask God for purpose, so He closed the door to the job that was limiting your potential. You ask God for strength, so He walked you through a season that required it. The moment you think everything is ending is usually the moment God begins rewriting your story. But the rewriting process often feels like ruin. Imagine a house being renovated. Walls are torn down, floors are ripped up, noise, dust, debris everywhere. If you walked in halfway through the process, you might assume the house is being destroyed. Yet the builder knows exactly what he's doing. He sees the final picture long before you do. In the same way, God sees the finished version of your life. The version where you're healed, strengthened, elevated and positioned in your purpose. But you're standing in the demolition stage thinking everything is falling apart. You're too close to the dust to see the design. You're too focused on the noise to see the new structure being built. God is not destroying you. He is rebuilding you. Every person God elevates goes through a period that feels like an ending. Joseph's brother sold him, and he landed in a pit. The pit wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the journey toward the palace. David was rejected, hunted, and pushed into hiding. The cave wasn't the end. It was the beginning of preparing him to be king. Moses fled into the wilderness believing he had failed. The wilderness wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the calling that would change nations. If you feel like your life is unraveling today, it's because God is preparing to reveal a bigger purpose than you expected. God never lets something end, unless He has something better to begin. And the reason most people miss the beginning is because they stop walking when the ending feels too painful. They freeze. They panic. They assume God has abandoned them. But God does His greatest work in the dark, in the silence, in the places where you feel forgotten. A seed must be buried before it grows, and darkness doesn't mean death. It means development. In the silent seasons when nothing makes sense, God is setting up what will make sense later. You're praying for a miracle, not realizing the miracle has already started. You don't recognize it yet because it doesn't look like the blessing. It looks like the breakdown. But breakthroughs rarely look beautiful at first. They look messy. They look uncertain. They look like tears, confusion, loss and unanswered questions. That's how God begins His greatest chapters. He dismantles what you thought your life should look like so he can give you what he always intended for you. Sometimes God will let everything unstable collapse, so that the only thing left standing in your life is him, because he knows you've been leaning on things that cannot hold the weight of your destiny. He watches you rely on people who don't have the capacity to go where he's taking you. He sees you attaching your hope to situations that were never meant to be permanent. And so he lets the things with weak foundations fall, not to hurt you but to protect you, not to punish you but to realign you, not to end your story but to redirect it. If what you're facing right now feels like a breaking point, understand that breaking points become turning points when God is involved. God never wastes pain. God never wastes loss. God never wastes disappointment. He uses it. He transforms it. He builds something out of it. The place where you feel empty is the place God will fill. The place where you feel defeated is the place God will bring victory. The place where you feel alone is the place God will meet you most intimately. The place where you feel forgotten is the place God is watching most closely. He sees the moment you collapse in tears. He sees the moment you whisper prayers you don't even have the strength to say out loud. He sees the cracks in your heart and the weight in your chest. And while you think, this is the end, God is whispering back, this is where I begin. One day, you will look back at this moment, the very moment you're afraid of right now, and you will thank God for it. You will understand why the door closed, why the person walked away, why the opportunity shifted, why the plan changed. You will see that God didn't take something from you. He cleared the way for something greater. You will realize that the ending you feared was the beginning you prayed for. And you will understand that God was never late, never absent, never silent. He was preparing you, shaping you, strengthening you, and guiding you, even through the things that didn't make sense at the time. What feels like the end is not the end. It is God making room for the new chapter that is already written, already blessed, and already waiting for you to step into it. Worry is not just a feeling. It is a silent, invisible enemy that enters the mind quietly and begins destroying from within. It weakens your faith without asking permission. It distorts your perception without making a sound. It steals your peace, your clarity, your joy, and your confidence one thought at a time. And the worst part is that it feels normal because you've lived with it for so long. You start waking up with it, eating with it, walking with it, sleeping with it. It becomes a companion that you never invited but somehow learned to tolerate. Yet worry is not harmless. Worry is a spiritual thief. It robs you of the ability to trust fully, to rest deeply, to believe boldly. It drains the energy you need for the battles that matter, leaving you exhausted from fights that God never asked you to fight. Worry speaks a language that contradicts God's truth. It whispers, you won't make it when God has already promised, I am with you. It says, you're alone while heaven declares I will never forsake you. Worry convinces you that the worst will happen even when God is planning your best. It magnifies the problem and minimizes the promise. It takes your mind to places your feet will never actually go. It shows you imaginary disasters, imaginary failures, imaginary heartbreaks, and imaginary tragedies, and your body responds as if they are real. You begin sweating, trembling, pacing, losing sleep, or overthinking scenarios that will never happen. Worry exhausts you emotionally, spiritually, and physically by trapping you in a future that does not exist. It tricks you into living tomorrow's fears with today's strength, and that is why you feel drained. Worry doesn't just whisper lies, it plants seeds. Small thoughts, like what if, become full-grown forests of fear. What if I fail? What if I lose everything? What if they leave me? What if it never works out? These questions multiply until you can't see clearly. Then worry goes deeper. It doesn't just attack your situation, it attacks your identity. It tries to convince you that you are weak, incapable, unqualified, unwanted, or unsupported. It convinces you that your worth is tied to your circumstances. It tells you that you're not strong enough to survive the storm, not smart enough to solve the problem, not loved enough to be protected, and not important enough to be seen by God. Worry becomes a voice that rewrites your self-image, until you no longer recognize the person God created you to be. Yet the truth is this: worry is always lying. Worry has never told the truth, not even once. The things you worried about 5 years ago, most didn't happen. The things you lost sleep over last month, God handled them. The scenarios you feared last week, none of them unfolded the way worry predicted. Worry is a prophet of doom with a 0% accuracy rate. But it knows if it can keep you distracted, it can keep you defeated. It knows if it can keep you busy imagining disaster, you will never have the faith to expect victory. It knows if it can enlarge fear, it can shrink faith, and it knows if it can keep your mind in chaos, it can keep you from hearing God's voice clearly. Worry also thrives in the unknown. The less you know, the louder worry becomes. Whenever you can't see the full plan, worry rushes in to fill the gaps with fear. Whenever you don't understand the timing, worry steps in with anxiety. Whenever you can't control the outcome, worry convinces you that everything will collapse. But the unknown is not your enemy. It is God's territory. The spaces you cannot see are the places where God does His greatest work. While you're panicking over what you don't know, God is building something you can't imagine. But worry blinds you. It makes you so focused on what might go wrong that you miss the miracles happening right in front of you. It makes you interpret silence as absence, waiting as rejection, and delay as denial. But God is never absent. He is never ignoring you. He is never withholding without purpose. Worry only makes it harder for you to recognize His presence. Worry also drains your spiritual strength. It makes you too tired to pray, too distracted to worship, too anxious to rest, and too overwhelmed to think clearly. It turns your mind into a battlefield where you fight shadows instead of real enemies. It keeps you mentally exhausted and spiritually drained, so that when real challenges come, you feel too weak to stand. That is how worry steals your authority. You were created to walk in power, confidence, clarity, and peace. But worry chains you to fear, insecurity, hesitation, and doubt. It makes you forget who you are and whose you are. It lowers your spiritual posture until you feel like a victim instead of a victor. And when you feel powerless, you stop expecting good things from God. Worry kills expectation. It kills hope. It kills joy. It kills vision. It kills courage. It kills faith. But beneath all of this, worry has a deeper agenda. It wants to separate you from God. Not literally, but relationally. Because the more you worry, the less you trust. The more you fear, the less you surrender. The more you panic, the less you lean on God. Worry builds a wall around your heart, one brick for every anxious thought, until it becomes difficult to hear God's voice through the noise. You begin relying on your own strength instead of His, your own understanding instead of His wisdom, your own plans instead of His purpose. And when you rely on yourself, you will always feel overwhelmed, because you were never meant to carry everything alone. Yet the moment you recognize worry for what it truly is, a thief, you can begin reclaiming what it's stolen. Peace returns when you stop giving worry permission to control your thoughts. Clarity returns when you stop imagining every worst-case scenario. Strength returns when you stop fighting battles God didn't ask you to fight. Faith returns when you stop focusing on everything you cannot control. When you remind yourself that God sees what you cannot see, knows what you cannot know, and is working where you cannot work, worry loses its power. It cannot survive in a heart that trusts God deeply. It cannot grow in a mind filled with truth. It cannot dominate a soul anchored in faith. Worry has always been a shadow, large, intimidating, but powerless against the light. And when the light of truth shines, the shadow disappears. That is why the enemy uses worry so aggressively. It keeps you from seeing the power, protection, and presence of God. But once you understand that worry has no authority unless you give it authority, you begin to rise above it. You begin to breathe again. You begin to feel peace that doesn't make sense. You begin to trust even when you don't understand. You begin to rest even when the storm hasn't ended. Because you finally realize that worry was never showing you reality, it was only showing you fear. And fear has no place where faith lives. Worry might knock on the door, but you don't have to let it in. It might whisper, but you don't have to listen. It might try to steal, but you don't have to hand over your peace. You have a God who holds your future, who walks ahead of you, who surrounds you, who strengthens you, and who provides for you. And when you understand that deeply, worry becomes powerless. It loses its grip. It shrinks back into the nothingness it came from. Because worry was never stronger than God. It only felt stronger when you forgot who was in control. Worry is a liar. Worry is a thief. But it is not your identity. And when you stop giving it permission to run your life, you begin to see just how much God has been protecting, guiding, and carrying you every step of the way. God is always working behind the scenes, even in the moments when you are convinced nothing is happening. This is one of the greatest mysteries of faith. The times when you feel forgotten are often the times when heaven is busiest on your behalf. But because you cannot see it, you assume God is silent. Because you cannot feel it, you assume God is absent. Because there is no visible movement, you convince yourself that your prayers are being ignored. Yet God is orchestrating details with a precision you can't imagine, aligning events with a timing you cannot predict, and preparing outcomes that are far better than anything you would have chosen for yourself. What looks like inactivity is often divine strategy. What feels like delay is often protection. What seems like nothing is actually everything. Think about how seeds grow. When the seed is in the soil, nothing appears to be happening. From the outside it looks dead, buried, forgotten. There is no movement, no sign, no clue that anything is taking place beneath the surface. But under that soil, hidden from sight, life is pushing through. Roots are forming, strength is developing, transformation is happening. It is in that invisible space where destiny begins. If you judge the seed by what you see above the soil, you'd assume it failed. But the invisible season is where God does His best work. In the same way, when you feel buried, under pressure, under stress, under fear, it does not mean God has abandoned you. It means He is preparing you for growth. The quiet, unseen, hidden part of your journey is not wasted. It is essential. There are moments when God must work in the backstage of your life, because if you saw everything He was doing, you wouldn't understand it. You would interfere. You would try to rush the process. You would fear the size of the blessing, because you're not ready yet. God prepares you privately, so that when He elevates you publicly, you can carry what He gives you. Sometimes He slows things down because rushing would ruin you. Sometimes He closes doors because the wrong door would destroy your peace. Sometimes He pulls you back, not to punish you, but to reposition you for a better impact. The behind-the-scenes season is where God separates what can go with you from what must stay behind. It's where He adjusts your character, strengthens your endurance, and refines your vision. You may not recognize it, but God often answers your prayers in ways you do not expect. You prayed for strength, and God gave you a challenge that makes you stronger. You prayed for wisdom, and God allowed a situation that forces you to think differently. You prayed for direction, and God removed the paths that were not meant for you. You prayed for peace, and God started cutting away the things that were disturbing your spirit. None of this feels pleasant. None of it feels exciting. But all of it is part of His hidden work. And if you look deeper, you would see that every closed door, every unanswered prayer, every unexpected shift is a piece of a much larger picture being arranged by hands far wiser than yours. One of the greatest frustrations people experience is the feeling that God is taking too long. You look at your life and see no movement. You see the same struggles, the same problems, the same uncertainties day after day. You want progress, but all you see is stillness. Yet stillness is not stagnation. Stillness is alignment. God often pauses you because He is moving someone else into place. He is changing circumstances, softening hearts, opening doors, preparing opportunities, and setting things up so that when the breakthrough comes, it arrives flawlessly. Timing is part of the miracle. If God gave you what you asked for too early, it would become a burden instead of a blessing. If He gave it too late, you might lose hope. So He gives it at the moment, when all things align, when you are ready, when the environment is prepared, and when the outcome will bring the most growth. Behind the scenes, God is speaking to people you haven't met yet who will play a role in your next season. He is positioning mentors, friends, partners, and helpers in ways you cannot see. He is orchestrating conversations that haven't happened yet. He is arranging opportunities that haven't been revealed yet. He is setting up divine connections that will feel like coincidences but are actually intentional appointments. You think your life is standing still, when in reality heaven is moving everything. You assume everything is quiet, but God is working with a strategy so detailed and so precise that if you saw it all at once you would be overwhelmed. Sometimes God hides His work because He doesn't want the enemy to interfere. Not everyone needs to see what God is building in your life. Not every person can handle the vision God placed inside you. Not every season requires explanation. There are blessings that grow best in silence. There are breakthroughs that require isolation. There are elevations that happen quietly so that when they manifest publicly, the enemy cannot sabotage them. God protects your future by hiding the process. He veils His movements, not to confuse you but to shield you from attacks you do not see coming. What feels like God being distant is often God being a defender. Another reason you may not see God working is because internal work always precedes external change. Before God shifts your environment, He shifts your mindset. Before He expands your territory, He expands your faith. Before He elevates your position, He strengthens your identity. The inner growth is the hardest to recognize because it doesn't come with applause or visible confirmation. It comes through quiet conviction, deep reflection, and spiritual stretching. It comes through trials that shape you and experiences that refine you. But this inner work is what prepares you to handle bigger blessings without collapsing under their weight. If you feel like you're in a season of waiting, understand that waiting is not wasted time. Waiting is preparation. Waiting is development. Waiting is the training ground for your destiny. The people who rush ahead without waiting on God often build things that collapse. But those who wait, even when it's painful, confusing, and uncertain, are the ones who walk into blessings that last. Waiting teaches trust. It teaches surrender. It teaches patience. And it teaches you to rely on God instead of your own understanding. In the moments when you feel like nothing is happening, remember, God is always doing more than you think, more than you see, and more than you can imagine. He is arranging what you prayed for. He is protecting you from what you don't know about. He is preparing things you didn't even think to request. You may not see the evidence yet, but the story is already unfolding. You may not feel the movement, but heaven is shifting the pieces. You may not understand the timing, but the plan is perfect. Nothing is ever still in your life. God is always working behind the scenes, always moving, always shaping, always preparing, always guiding, even in the silence, even in the darkness, even in the waiting. Faith is not ignorance, and it is not denial. Faith is the ability to look at the same situation that terrifies everyone else and still choose to believe that God has the final say. It is the inner conviction that even when nothing makes sense, even when everything is breaking, even when the future is unclear, God is still in control. Anxiety tries to convince you that your world is falling apart. But faith reminds you that the world is still in God's hands. Anxiety makes you focus on what you can't control. Faith shifts your focus to the one who controls everything. Anxiety makes you imagine the worst possible outcomes. Faith makes you expect God's best. When you face something overwhelming, anxiety tells you, you cannot handle this. But faith answers, God is with me, God is in me, and God is for me. Faith does not remove challenges. It changes how you face them. You can go through the exact same storm with two completely different experiences depending on whether you face it with anxiety or with faith. Anxiety makes the storm feel bigger, darker, more dangerous. Faith does not promise that the storm will disappear instantly, but it gives you peace in the middle of it. You stop drowning in fear because faith teaches you how to breathe again. You stop panicking because faith reminds you that God has never failed you before. You stop catastrophizing because faith tells you that God is not surprised by anything that is happening. What terrifies you is something God saw long before it reached you, and He already prepared a way through it. Faith is the antidote to anxiety because anxiety thrives in uncertainty, but faith thrives in surrender. Anxiety demands answers. Faith trusts without them. Anxiety tries to control the outcome. Faith hands it over to God. Anxiety stresses about the future. Faith knows that God is already there waiting. Anxiety tries to convince you that everything is up to you. Faith reminds you that you were never meant to carry life alone. When you shift from "how am I going to fix this?" to "God, I trust you with this," something inside you settles. Your heart stops racing. Your mind stops running. Your soul stops shaking. Faith becomes an anchor that holds you steady when life tries to throw you off course. Faith is not passive. It is a powerful, active force. It doesn't sit and hope for change. It aligns with change. It speaks differently. It thinks differently. It behaves differently. When anxiety says, "What if everything goes wrong?" faith responds, "What if God turns everything around?" When anxiety says, "You're not strong enough," faith says, "God's strength is made perfect in my weakness." When anxiety says, "You are alone," faith says, "God walks with me through every valley." When anxiety says, "You can't survive this," faith says, "I have survived everything I thought would break me." Faith rewrites the script that anxiety keeps trying to read to you. Most people don't realize that anxiety is not just emotional. It is spiritual. It attacks your trust in God. It makes you rely on your own understanding. It shifts your focus from God's power to your problems. It magnifies the mountain and minimizes the miracle. Faith reverses this. Faith magnifies God and shrinks the mountain. Faith sees the problem but refuses to bow to it. Faith acknowledges fear but refuses to be owned by it. Faith does not pretend everything is okay. It declares that God can make everything okay. Faith does not deny reality. It chooses a higher reality. God's truth over your fear. God's promises over your panic. God's word over your worry. Anxiety grows when you meditate on your fears. But faith grows when you meditate on God's faithfulness. Anxiety gets stronger when you replay negative outcomes. But faith grows when you remember how God showed up for you in the past. Every time you look back at something you thought you wouldn't survive but did, your faith gets a little deeper. Every time you recall a moment you felt forgotten but God came through, your confidence grows. Faith is strengthened when you see patterns of God's goodness in your life. Anxiety tries to make you forget, but faith makes you remember. Faith also changes your perspective of time. Anxiety is always future focus. What will happen? What if it goes wrong? What if I fail? Anxiety pulls you out of the present moment and drags you into an imagined future that has not happened. Faith brings you back to now. Faith reminds you that God only gives grace for today, not tomorrow. Tomorrow's grace arrives tomorrow. So when you try to live tomorrow's fears with today's strength, you will always collapse. Faith keeps you grounded in the present, the only place where God gives peace. Anxiety rushes ahead. Faith rests. Anxiety tries to control time. Faith trusts God's timing. Faith also affects your physical world. Anxiety creates tension, tightness, sleepless nights, restlessness, and heaviness. Faith loosens the tension, calms the nerves, relaxes the body, and brings rest. Many people don't realize how much of their exhaustion is spiritual. It's not that life is too heavy. It's that you're trying to carry what God told you to surrender. Faith is an act of release. It says, "God, I give you what I cannot fix." And when you release what you were never meant to carry, peace flows in. Faith also teaches you how to respond to situations that once triggered anxiety. Instead of reacting emotionally, you begin responding spiritually. Instead of panicking at every unexpected change, you begin asking, "What is God doing here?" Instead of seeing obstacles as threats, you begin seeing them as opportunities. Instead of assuming the worst, you begin expecting God's best. Instead of feeling overwhelmed, you begin feeling supported. Faith gives you strength you didn't know you had. It gives you courage you didn't think you could access. It gives you clarity that anxiety always tries to blur. Another powerful truth is that faith is contagious. When your faith grows, it affects everything around you, your relationships, your choices, your habits, your decisions. You begin speaking differently, thinking differently, and living differently. Your presence becomes peaceful instead of anxious. Your words become hopeful instead of fearful. Your energy becomes calm instead of chaotic. You become someone who carries God's presence instead of carrying worry. And people around you notice. Your faith becomes a testimony without you saying a word. Anxiety reduces life to survival, but faith expands life to purpose. Anxiety keeps you small, but faith calls you higher. Anxiety traps you in fear, but faith opens the door to possibility. Anxiety drains your strength, but faith renews your strength like an eagle. Faith lifts your eyes from the storm to the one who commands the storm. It lifts your heart from fear to confidence. It lifts your spirit from heaviness to hope. Faith is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to trust God more than you trust your fears. Fear may still speak, but faith refuses to obey it. Anxiety may still whisper, but faith shouts louder. And when faith becomes your first response instead of your last resort, peace becomes your lifestyle. You stop living like someone who is fighting for victory, and you start living like someone who is fighting from victory. Because with faith you know that no matter what comes, God is already there, God is already working, and God is already providing the strength you need to walk through it. That is why faith is the antidote to anxiety. Because faith reconnects you to the truth that God is bigger than anything that scares you. Worry becomes heavy because it convinces you that everything depends on you. It makes you believe that you must solve every problem, carry every responsibility, and hold every piece of your life together with your bare hands. But you were never designed to live that way. You were never created to carry the full weight of life on your shoulders. And deep down, your spirit knows this. That's why worry feels so exhausting. That's why anxiety feels so suffocating. Because you're trying to carry something only God has the strength to hold. When you finally understand this, when you finally realize that your heart wasn't made to handle the burdens you're trying to manage alone, something inside you begins to shift. Something inside you softens, and a new sense of peace starts to rise. There is a kind of pressure that builds slowly, the kind that comes from believing you must figure everything out. You must fix the relationship. You must secure the job. You must protect the people you love. You must control outcomes, avoid mistakes, and anticipate every problem before it even appears. But that is the exact trap worry sets for you, convincing you that you are responsible for everything, even the things no human could ever manage. And the more you accept that lie, the harder life becomes. Not because the problems are too big, but because you're trying to play a role you were never assigned. You are not God. You are not meant to be your own savior. You are meant to be the one who trusts, the one who leans, the one who releases what is too heavy. Think about how children operate. They do not sit on the edge of their bed worrying about rent, electricity bills, or how the groceries will be bought next week. They don't carry the stress of adult responsibilities. They just rest. They just live, because they trust that someone bigger, stronger, wiser, and more capable is taking care of them. That is what God invites you into. A childlike trust that says, I don't have to carry everything because my Father already sees everything. He already knows what you are facing, what you fear, and what you're trying desperately to control. And He whispers, give it to me. Let me carry what you can't. But the challenge is that worry convinces you it's safer to hold on than to let go. You cling to outcomes, timelines, expectations, and fears, as if your grip on them is what keeps your life from falling apart. You believe that if you loosen your hold, everything will spin out of control. Yet the truth is the opposite. Your life doesn't fall apart when you release it to God. Your life falls into place, because only He has the full view. Only He understands what's ahead. Only He knows the roads you cannot see. Holding on to control doesn't protect you. It limits you, and it drains you. There is a freedom that comes when you say, God, I can't carry this anymore, and I don't have to. Imagine carrying a heavy suitcase for miles. At first you might manage it. You might even convince yourself you're strong enough. But eventually your hands ache, your shoulders burn, and your energy fades. You don't drop it because the suitcase got heavier. It's the same weight it always was. You drop it because you were never built to carry it indefinitely. That's how worry works. It burdens your soul with weight that grows heavier over time. Not because the problems are changing, but because your heart was not designed to hold them. And God is like someone walking beside you saying, let me carry that. You don't have to do this alone. But many people cling to the weight because they assume carrying it makes them responsible or strong. But real strength is knowing when to hand the weight to the one who has infinite strength. There are things in your life right now that God has been waiting for you to release. The fear about your future, the stress about your finances, the pressure to fix something broken, the guilt from something you regret, the confusion about your next step, the heaviness in your heart that you've tried to bury instead of surrendering. Some of your emotional exhaustion isn't coming from your circumstances. It's coming from the fact that you're carrying things God never asked you to carry. You're holding on to burdens that don't belong in your hands. You are trying to be the answer to problems that only God can solve. And every day that you hold on to them, you feel more drained, more overwhelmed, more spiritually tired. Releasing your burdens to God doesn't mean you stop caring. It doesn't mean you become passive. It means you transfer ownership from your limited strength to His unlimited power. It means you trust that He can handle what you cannot. It means you stop acting as if everything depends on you and start remembering that everything depends on Him. When you let go, when you finally say, God, this is too much for me, you allow Him to do what only He can do. You make room for His peace to replace your fear. You make room for His clarity to replace your confusion. You make room for His strength to replace your weakness. Too many people think surrender is failure. But surrender is actually wisdom. It's recognizing that you're human. And humans were made to depend on God. You were designed for partnership with Him, not independence from Him. Everything inside you, your spirit, your emotions, your mind functions better when you release what is too heavy. It's like unclenching your fists after holding them tight for too long. The release feels unnatural at first, because worry taught you to grip everything hard. But once you loosen your hold, once you breathe again, you realize this is how your soul was meant to exist. Resting, trusting, releasing. And here is the truth. You must not ignore. When you release something to God, you don't lose control, you gain peace. You don't lose security. You gain divine protection. You don't lose outcomes. You gain alignment with His perfect timing. Nothing gets worse when placed in God's hands. It only becomes lighter, or clearer, or better than anything you could have built alone. That is why God keeps calling you to give Him your burdens, your worries, your fears, your uncertainties. Not because He wants to take things from you, but because He wants to lift the weight that has been crushing you from the inside. There is a life waiting for you on the other side of release. A life where your heart can breathe again. A life where you wake up without the heaviness pressing on your chest. A life where you walk with confidence knowing you are not carrying everything by yourself. But that life begins with a decision. A moment where you say, God, this is yours now. And once you give Him what was never yours to hold, He begins to do what only He can do. Restore, heal, guide, strengthen, and lead you into the peace you've been searching for. There is a deep comfort that comes when you finally understand that God is not only watching over your life, He is actively taking care of everything. Not someday in the future, not only when you are strong enough, not only when you pray perfectly, not only when you feel spiritual enough, but today, right now, in this very moment. God is holding every detail, every worry, every unseen struggle in His hands. Most people don't realize this because their minds are too noisy and their hearts too weighed down by fear. They confuse silence with absence, delay with denial, and uncertainty with abandonment. But God has never taken His eyes off you for a single moment. Even when you felt forgotten, even when you thought nothing was changing, He was moving pieces behind the scenes in ways you didn't notice. His care is constant, unbroken, unshaken. It flows into your life even when you aren't aware of it. When God says He is taking care of everything, it doesn't mean life becomes effortless. It means the weight of life is no longer yours alone. It means the battles you face are no longer fought with your limited strength, but with His unlimited power. It means the path you walk is no longer guided by fear, but by His wisdom, His timing, and His protection. Too many people live as if God only steps in during emergencies, as if He watches from a distance until things become too heavy. But God doesn't operate like that. He is the God who goes before you, the God who stands beside you, the God who walks behind you, and the God who surrounds you. He is involved in every layer of your life, your relationships, your finances, your decisions, your safety, your health, your future. There is nothing too small for Him to notice, and nothing too big for Him to handle. Every morning you wake up, God has already lined up the strength you need for the day. He has already prepared the moments of protection that you'll never see. He has already orchestrated the conversations, opportunities, and connections that will move you forward at the right time. You don't wake up into chaos, you wake up into divine order, even if it doesn't look like it yet. And this is where trust becomes your greatest weapon. Because the more you trust that God is handling things, the less room fear has to grow. Worry thrives in the absence of trust. Anxiety grows when you forget who is actually in control. But when you say God is taking care of everything, you are choosing peace over panic and faith over fear. You are choosing to stabilize your heart in something unshakable. There are countless moments in your life when God protected you from things you didn't even know were coming. Times when He blocked the wrong path, not to punish you but to protect you. Times when He delayed something because the timing wasn't right. Times when He closed the door because the room on the other side would have destroyed you. Times when He allowed something uncomfortable because it was shaping you into someone stronger, wiser, and more prepared. God's care is not always comfortable, but it is always purposeful. He sees the whole picture. You only see a single moment, and because of that you misinterpret His care as silence. But silence is often the space where God does His most important work. Some people wonder why certain prayers take so long to be answered. They assume God is ignoring them. But God is not ignoring you. He is preparing what you ask for. He is aligning the people, the resources, the timing, the atmosphere, and the opportunities, so that when the blessing arrives, it will not be premature or fragile. It will be complete. God does not give half-built answers. He completes what He begins. He perfects what concerns you. He finishes what He starts. And because He cares for you, He refuses to give you something before you're ready, or before the environment around you is ready to receive it. When you accept that God is taking care of everything, you begin to live differently. You stop forcing outcomes that are not yours to control. You stop begging for doors that were never meant to open. You stop panicking about things that are already in God's hands. Instead, you start to breathe more deeply. You start to walk with confidence. You start to see challenges not as threats but as opportunities for God to reveal His power. You start to realize that nothing can happen to you without passing through God's wisdom first. And suddenly life becomes lighter. Not because your problems disappear, but because you stop carrying them alone. God is taking care of your family even when you feel helpless. He is taking care of your finances even when the numbers don't make sense. He is taking care of your future even when you don't see the next step. He is taking care of your heart even when it feels broken. He is taking care of your path, even when the way seems uncertain. You don't have to dismantle your own fears. God will do it piece by piece as you trust Him more. You don't have to understand everything. God will reveal what you need to know at the right time. You don't have to carry every burden. God invites you to release them because He cares more deeply than you can imagine. Every miracle begins with trust. Every breakthrough begins with surrender. Every answered prayer begins with the belief that God is present and active. Faith is not just believing God exists. It is believing He is involved. It is believing He is guiding, protecting, arranging, correcting, restoring, and providing. It is believing that even when you feel overwhelmed, God is not overwhelmed. Even when you feel lost, God is not confused. Even when you feel discouraged, God is still working. There will be moments when things do not go the way you expected, and yet even then God is taking care of everything. Because sometimes the things you lose are things that were never meant to stay. Sometimes the people who leave are people who were blocking what God wants to bring. Sometimes the closed door is a divine redirect, not a rejection. Sometimes the delay is a setup for something far greater. God's care is not always obvious, but it is always intentional. The greatest shift you can make today is choosing to believe. Not just intellectually, but emotionally and spiritually. that God is taking care of everything in your life, not just the big things, not just the impossible things, but every detail. And when you embrace that truth, fear begins to lose its authority, worry begins to weaken, anxiety begins to shrink, because a heart that trusts God cannot be dominated by fear. A mind anchored in His care cannot be controlled by panic. A life surrendered to His hands cannot be shaken by uncertainty. God is taking care of everything today. He is not waiting for you to be perfect. He is not waiting for a better moment. He is not waiting for circumstances to calm down. He is working right now. And every step you take with faith gives Him more room to reveal just how deeply, fully and faithfully He cares for you. So today, make a decision that will change the entire atmosphere of your life. Stop gripping everything so tightly. Stop fighting battles that don't belong to you. Stop letting worry rob you of the peace God has already assigned to your heart. Lift your eyes, lift your hands, lift your expectations. Because the God who carried you through every valley, every storm, every night of fear and confusion is the same God who is carrying you right now. He has not lost control. He has not withdrawn His hand. He has not forgotten His promise. He has not stepped away for a single second. You are covered more than you realize. You are protected more than you can measure. You are guided more than you can feel. And if God is taking care of everything, truly everything, then you don't have to live one more day chained to fear. You don't have to live one more morning overwhelmed. You don't have to lie awake at night replaying every what if. God is already in your tomorrow, preparing it, shaping it, securing it. Your job is not to figure everything out. Your job is to trust the one who already has. Take one deep breath and let this truth sink into your spirit. God is not just watching your life. He is governing it with love, wisdom and power. Nothing can break you when God is holding you. Nothing can stop you when God is leading you. Nothing can destroy you when God is defending you. You are safe. You are seen. You are surrounded. Walk forward with courage. Step into your day with confidence. Lift your head with authority. The God of creation is taking care of everything concerning you. And when God takes care of something, it cannot remain broken. It cannot remain lost. It cannot remain impossible. Your story is in hands that do not fail. Trust Him and watch Him turn every worry into peace, every burden into strength, and every uncertainty into a testimony of His faithfulness. Your life is about to become the evidence that God truly takes care of His own.